Okay then, this is going to be a fun video. This is going to be quick fire. So, 30 seconds, every single team in the Overwatch League, their current confirmed movements in this current transfer window. Of course, some teams have got a lot more than others, so it will be very interesting to cover this, but there's 30 seconds for every single team. I'm aiming not to break that rule. So, 30 seconds for the intro, and obviously, if we go over on some of them, then god damn it, because it will probably be Dallas Fuel, because, you know, Dallas Fuel have made so many moves in this off-season, it's very hard to keep track of. But without further ado, let's get into it. We start off with the Atlanta Reign then, where we see that they've made a few changes, but not actually that much. On October the 22nd, they announced the departure of Fire, Dogman, FRD, Erster, Pokepo, and Saucy, all players of which had featured quite heavily for them this season, but not too much. They also announced the departure of assistant coaches Kodak, Silence, and Mentalist. They currently have on their roster assigned Gator, Massa, Hawk, Edison, Sharp, and Iris or Laris. We expect more additions coming in the near future at the Atlanta Reign, but it's been a fairly slow start for them. Next up, we have the Boston Uprising, a team full of moves right now. First of all, they signed up a new head coach, Laurie. This coach was coming in from WGS Phoenix, and that's a pretty pog signing if you ask me. Then they announced the departure of Mikey and Halo, the support and the tank, and then they announced the departure of Taehi. And then, when we look at their roster right now, they still have Color Hex, Fusions, Moonbong Punk, and Axiom still inactive, with the 4 previous players that I mentioned all assigned to new contracts. So, they are staying at the Boston Uprising. Next up, Chengdu Hunters. Chengdu Hunters announced the retirement of both 18 and Bacon Jack, 18 being the tank player and Bacon Jack being the DPS player, earlier in this transfer window. They've also they've not actually nailed down anyone to new contracts yet, but currently on their roster from 2020, they still have Kyo, Yveltal, Elsa, Late Young, Among, Jinmu, Leave, Molly, Lengsa, but a lot of these are still yet to be tied down to new contracts, and we don't have any rumours on new players for them at the moment. They've had no official incomings. Dallas Fuel, they announced the departure of Coach Vol'jin. They also announced the departure of Onigol, Crimson, Note, Paintbrush, AKM, Unco, Closer, Trill, and Gamsu. They all left the team, but they re-signed Doha onto a new contract. After this, they decided to sign up some Paris Eternal players, being Hamben, Sparkle, and then the head coach of Paris Eternal, Rush. Then they brought in Fielder and Repel. They also announced that they assigned assistant coach Aid from the Paris Eternal as well. And now, most recently, they brought in the Shanghai Dragons main tank, Fearless, to complete a very big off-season so far for the Dallas Fuel, and they're not finished yet. It's been relatively quiet for the Florida Mayhem as of yet. They announced on October the 14th the departure of Sire player Carrion, Chris, and Byram, meaning they would have to get in a new main support, but they haven't done that as of yet. Currently, still assigned to the Florida Mayhem, we have BQB, Fake, Gargoyle, Yaki, and Gangnam Jin, but only Gangnam Jin and Yaki are tied down to contracts right now, so the others are still possibly going to move. We have had rumours of Sanguinar, I've done the Spitfire, moving to fill that main support role at the Florida Mayhem, but nothing is confirmed as of yet. Guangzhou Charge have been relatively active. They announced the departure of Jin and Taidola Sungwoo, their coaching staff, and then they announced the departure of Neptuno, Chara, Crystal, and Weya as players as well. They also announced a new head coach, Arachne, coming in from San Francisco Shock, and we also, when we look at their roster right now, they currently have assigned Eileen, Happy, Rio, Shu, Krong, and Nero, but only Krong and Eileen are currently tied down to contacts for the Guangzhou Charge, and so there could be a lot of movements in the Guangzhou Charge coming up in the next couple of months. Pancho Spark have been relatively active, announcing new supervisor Zhao Gui going. Then they announced the departure of Ado, Adora, Ria, Sassin, and Bebe, all going out. And then they announced the signing of DPS player from China, Shai, coming up from academy teams in China. Gushui, Godspeed, IDK, Coldest, Mika, Architect, QAQ, and Shai all tied down at the Hangzhou Spark and will not be going anywhere unless someone buys them out. And so Hangzhou Spark are looking in a pretty good position now and are one of the most filled rosters in the league right now at this point in the off-season. Houston Outlaws up next, and they announced that they signed Junkbuck as head coach coming in from the San Francisco Shock, and they also announced that a new general manager, Coolmat, would be coming in after Coolmat was part of their management system before, and a previous player. Currently, assigned to the Outlaws, we only have Point, Dante, Hydration, and Meko, but only Dante and Hydration are tied down to contracts at the Houston Outlaws. Every single other player has left or moved to another team, including Rappel moving over to the Texas rivals, the Dallas Fuel. Jexer, Blase, Linksa, Muma, and Raucus all moved out either at this point in the season or earlier on during this season. The saga continues at the London Spitfire, where we see them announce the departure of Agape, Pavane, Twinkle, and Skix, all of their coaching staff, including all of their players, or pretty much all of their players, although Babel, Shui, Jihan, Celestin, Hailey, and Krillin, they all left, and then they announced the new general manager, Nuki, coming in from British Hurricane to do that dual role. They also then announced the departure of JMac. They still currently have Banar, Fuse, Glister, and Sanguinar assigned to them, but we're expecting all of them to leave, and we are expecting the London Spitfire to promote their academy team, British Hurricane, to the main roster for the 2021 Overwatch League season. Los Angeles Gladiators next, where they announced the departure of Jaru. They Bishu and Shaz and Big Goose, they all left. Then we saw Carisot go as well, alongside Ledich Cloudy, OGE Fostus. And then they announced Di Dollar coming in alongside General Manager Brenda Shu. Then, when we look at their roster currently right now, we see Space Birdwing, Mirror, and Kevster. They're all currently tied down to contracts at the Los Angeles Gladiators, and so would need to be bought out if they're going to move anywhere in the Overwatch League. The Gladiators are still building, and there's been rumours around Moth, Shu, and Super moving to the team in recent times. Los Angeles Valiant up next, and they announced that they would have departing Apply, Gig, and McGravy. They will be leaving the team. McGravy was a surprise considering he was the main off-tank for the team this season. Currently on their roster they have KSF, Shax, Dream, Alastra, Rain, and KSP, but KSF is an outlier here because he's not currently tied down to a contract at the Los Angeles Valiant and so could move. And it would be very interesting to see KSF move, considering the season he has had for the Los Angeles Valiant, and I expect the Valiant to be building further for 2021, we will see in the coming weeks and months. New York Excelsior up next, and they announced that Haxel will be retiring at the end of this Overwatch League season, and that he did. They also announced the departure of Nene, Who Are You, Hotba, and Bianca, leaving them with no off-tank. Also, recently we saw Mano traded to the Philadelphia Fusion, and Mandu released of his contract as well at the New York Excelsior. Currently they only have 4 players, with Selby, Elby, Libero, Jonak, and Animo on the team, but at the moment none of them are tied down to contracts for 2021, so the New York Excelsior could look very, very different in 2021 than we are used to seeing for the past 3 years. Paris Eternal up next, and they've let a lot go. They announced the departure initially of Smex, Fielder, and No Smite, and then they announced the departure of 9K, coaches Rush and Aid, Levy, Hanbin, and Sparkle. Most of these going to Dallas. 9K ended up, I believe, at the Philadelphia Fusion as head coach. They currently only have XE and FD God assigned to their roster after they also allowed Soon, Nico, and Bembest to look for other options in the Overwatch League and elsewhere as well. Paris Eternal do not have a fieldable roster right now, and they don't have a fieldable coaching staff either. It's just a Valor on her own doing her best. On to the Philadelphia Fusion now, who announced the leaving of Boombox, as well as their coaches KDG and also the player Chipser. They announced new head coach 9K coming in for the Paris Eternal, and they also announced new main tank Mano coming in for the New York Excelsior very, very recently. Currently on their roster they have Carpe, Poco, Sado, EQO, Ivy, Fury, Alarm, Funny Astro, Hisu, and Mano, but of those players, only Carpe, Hisu, Mano, Funny Astro, and Alarm are tied down to contracts at the Philadelphia Fusion for 2021. So that leaves us with the opportunity of seeing a lot of moves at the Philadelphia Fusion in the coming weeks and months. Champion San Francisco Shock up now, and they announced that the departure of assistant coaches Arcane, Arachne, and other assistant coaches among them as well. Then we saw the departure of Rascal, who was no longer with them as well, and they brought in new assistant coach Agape to fill that role, and they promoted Caceres to the assistant coach role as well to fill the holes left. Currently on their team they have Super, Moth, Troy Coben, Smurfed, Violet, Striker, Ans, Twilight, and Tayo, but at the moment only assigned for the 2021 season are Ans, Striker, Tayo, Troy Coben, Smurf, and Twilight. We see what happens there, won't we? Seoul Dynasty next, and they announced the departure of General Manager Hockery. He is going over to the Washington Justice for this season, but they currently have on their roster Toby, Michelle, Marvel, Fitz, Illicit, Prophet, Gesture, Creative, Bedosin, Slime, and Tuyu, but some of them have been let go, and the only tied down players for 2021 are Prophet, Fitz, Gesture, Marvel, and Creative. We could see a lot more moves at the Seoul Dynasty in coming weeks and months, so keep an eye on them, including links with Glister and other players in the Overwatch League. They are currently lacking an off-tank for future reference. Shanghai Dragons next, the winners of APAC, and they announced the departure of Dia, Giguri, Ding, DM, and Luffy at the start of this transfer window, leaving them all to be free agents. Also, most recently, we've seen Fearless move over to the Dallas Fuel, leaving them with only one main tech, that being Stand 1. Currently on their active roster, they have Ziaki, Fletter, Lip, Void, Stand 1, and Lige gone. They are all signed down for the next season of the Overwatch League, and I wish them all the best going forward for that. Although I'm expecting moves out of Shanghai Dragons, considering their roster doesn't meet league rules right now for 2021. Toronto Defiant now, and they announced the departure of Roki, Mangachu, Kari, Vigilities, Beast, Nevix, Zik, Cruz, and Numlocked, all leaving. They re-signed Logix though, and then they brought in new head coach KDG from the Philadelphia Fusion. They also announced the departure of General Manager OWLRU. They have currently only Logix assigned to their roster, but most recently they brought back Beast from American Tornado in NA Contenders. We wish them all the best with their rebuild, and there's going to be a lot of moves at the Toronto Defiant coming up in the weeks and months, and we will see how they look for 2021 as those announcements come out. Vancouver Titans next, and they announced the departure of Suna, KSA, and Karkar at the start of this transfer window. Currently, they only have Dalton, Shredlock, Rolf, and Shockwave assigned to their team. Shockwave is expected to move before the end of this off-season, Shockwave being one of the standout lights for the Vancouver Titans this year. Dalton, Shredlock, and Rolf have all been re-signed to new contracts for the Vancouver Titans, and so will be featuring for them in 2021. We are expecting a lot more moves at this Vancouver Titans squad before the end of this off-season, so we will keep an eye on them very, very closely. Lastly, we have the Washington Justice, who announced the departure of Coach Wiz and departure of Raw, their main tank. Then they signed in runaway main tank Mag and re-signed Decay, the DPS player that they signed near the end of last season. They've also announced new coach Hokuri coming in from his general manager role at the Seoul Dynasty. They currently have on their roster Tuba, Aim God, Stitch, Jano, Decay and Mag, but of those players, only Mag, Tuba and Decay are signed down to contracts for 2021. We're expecting a lot of moves at the Washington Justice in coming weeks and months, so we'll be keeping a very close eye on them once again. But that is it for this video. I think that was a really awesome way to try and rattle through what's been going on so far. Again, if as things continue to happen, I'll continue to do things like this in the future. It's divided up into 30-second segments, and I think it's a really awesome way, a quick fire way to get out this information that's currently going on in the Overwatch League. It's going to be very, very interesting. There are tons and tons of stuff going on, but let's stick with it. Great support on the channel so far, guys. I really, really do appreciate your support. But I'm going to leave it here for this one. So thank you guys so much for this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.